So hello everyone. We are back with the last two wonderful speakers for today. It's my pleasure to welcome here Marita. Marita is from the CRR Global organization. She's one of the founders. And she's the person who introduced me into the system coaching and very interesting things, which changed my life completely. So, Marita.
Thank you so much, Susie. It's a pleasure for me to be with you, and I want for everybody that is listening and participating here to know that at the moment you need to know that I am not an agilist. I just told Susie that I'm an agile voyeur. So I'm here to share with you some information that really is about the way in which we are leveraging tools and skills so that we can influence how other people are actually moving ahead in what they do in their work. So I'm here this morning to actually upload the brilliance, your brilliance, and from that situation, really find the ways in which you can make these applications to Agile. And right now, I'm in a situation where it won't allow me to click. There you go. Let me reduce this a little bit so that I can see you better. So when we start talking about relationship systems intelligence, and when we start talking about working with systems using a relationship systems perspective, the thing that you need to remember, and that is absolutely critical for us to put in the foreground, is that relationship matters. That's the place where we want for you to put your attention. And from that perspective, there really is a shift that we need to make, and the shift is from focusing on me, the individual, or the individual in front of us, to the we, that is the two of us together, or the six of us together. And then from there, shift the perspective to the relationship entity itself. Who and what is it? So from that perspective, there is a whole different way that we can look at how we work with teams, organizations, enterprise, wherever your focus is. So my invitation for you today is to pay attention to the material, to know that it is providing you with a frame from which you can leverage every single tool and skill that you have, and hopefully find some new ones as well. So want to invite you to really help us pay attention to, and in your work, pay attention to the expansion of the range of intelligences. We are very familiar with the intelligences as we know it from the past, whether we are talking about emotional, social intelligence. But we got interested in the thing that we call relationship systems intelligence. What's the intelligence of the system itself? And there's been some very interesting research through MIT Carnegie University, where they started looking for collective intelligence. They had random groups, large numbers, in which they were providing them with tasks to perform. They had the IQ of everyone. And part of what they were looking at is what creates collective intelligence. And the findings were quite interesting because what they discover was that the teams that were collectively most intelligent, actually, let me stay with that just for a little bit, that the teams that collectively performed better were the teams where the members that made up of the team had a strong social awareness. They were aware of what is happening with the rest of their team members on a non-strategic strategic level. on an emotional level. So a higher emotional sensitivity was one of the things. They also found that groups that were dominated by one person, or the traditional top-down leadership where there's a single person that has the answers that drive the conversations, were less effective than the groups that had roundtable conversations where collective input was leveraged. The third one that they found was that teams that consist of that have more women in it seem to be more effective in performance and in completing tasks. Now that relates to the first one where there's a bias that suggests that women have um currently a higher sensitivity to the emotional field and what's happening in that. And my assumption always when I talk about this is that the men that's on this particular call and sitting with us probably falls more in the feminine side in terms of all of that. So the results that they came up with is that having a bunch of intelligent people doesn't make for an effective or an intelligent team. A lot of the work that we have seen discovered evidence for empirically in the last 20 years of the way that we've been working in organization and relationship systems coaching bears out some of this research. So we started talking about if we already know about emotional intelligence, and the brief summary of that is that it's the capacity, it's knowing who I am, what's going on inside of me. I'm the first system. So don't think of yourself as just one thing or the person in front of you. There's always been a group because of the different selves. So emotional intelligence, my understanding of my land, my experience. It's always been closely related to social intelligence. That really is taking my experience, seeing it in the context of who I am with somebody else, and have awareness of that. The place where we're looking with RSI is that relationship systems intelligence, the definition of that for us is that ability to know that something that's happening to me or you is personal. It's my experience, but it also belongs to the system. What happens to me, what happens to the person across from me, is a systemic experience. My ability to feel and know that is what we look at as a marker for RSI or relationship systems intelligence. And the pandemic is a really good example where it's personal, whether I lose a loved one or whether my partner needs to be in lockdown because there's a symptom. You can see how what happens to one is a systemic event, and it happens all across the board. So RSI, we came up with 5 principles for RSI. And the first principle, and here's the place where I want for you to upload your brilliance. When you think of these are guiding principles for the work that we do. Every single tool and skill, every single interaction with a client or with somebody that we engage with is guided by, and the way in which it will come out will be influenced by one of these principles. So think of the tools you have, think of the people you work with, think of what you do, and begin to map it against which of the principles actually did you execute on. Gravity is a guiding principle. I know I've got some coffee here. I know that if I knock it over, it will fall down. It's irrevocable. That's what happens unless I'm in space. So, guiding principles. The first one is that each relationship system has its own unique identity. And it's really easy when you think in terms of rock bands, when you think in terms of symphony orchestras, when you think in terms of sports teams. They may play the same game, they may play the same symphony, but every single one of them has something that's different. That's that each has its own unique identity. When you begin to think about the individuals that you're working with, we know separate personalities, same human being, but separate profile, separate way of manifesting. The same thing with teams. There's not just one agile team. There's not just one management team. Each one of them, think of who you are working with. And if you were to bring a metaphor to a team that you're thinking of now, somebody the other day talked about a feisty team. Somebody else talked about a pensive team. Can you see how when you engage with them, it's really important for you to know how they are different? Because one size in our engagements, in our relationships, doesn't fit all. So, first principle, each relationship has its own unique identity. Um, they're not, one is not more important than others. So, just know that they are iterative, although we have numbers here. The other thing that we hold, and that's what shows up in the collective intelligence as well, is that each expression by each person within the system is an expression of the system itself. So that voice that's not just personal, but it also is an expression of the system. So the question of who does what to whom is not so relevant anymore. It is about when that happens, what's trying to happen. If that interaction is an expression of the system, what really is trying to happen? So every member is a voice of the system. Um, the other one that's important is, and it's not always easy for us to think of. When we're talking about the systems are uniquely intelligent by nature, generative and acting on things creatively. Um, we need to remember that systems work on a very different timeline from us as individuals. So my experience in this now of what seems to be a breakdown because of the pandemic or the fires, the wildfires that are surrounding us, for me personally, I can't quite see the generativeness of that. But if we look at systems from that cosmic view, that there's a movement, and we'll talk more about this later as well, then we can see that there is some outcomes that is shifting the system collectively in a different direction. So walk with this one and begin to look at what's happening around you, and go to the bigger picture of how that is influencing. Um, the fourth one is an interesting one for us in corporate environments, and it's a relief for leaders that roles belong to the system itself. Actually, the only way that a system and a relationship system can express itself is through the voices of its members and through the execution of outer roles: CEO, agile coach, CFO. That's a role that is assigned and designated. But the wisdom, the generativity that is demanded from that role or has been demanded in the past from that role is a collective function. That in any given moment in time, think about that roundtable conversation as well. Somebody else other than the leader may have the answer. Many of you on this presentation and call might have heard me speak before, and it's a story that I often repeat because it's the biggest learning event. Read this for me. We were doing a world work session. It was a week-long session with Arnold Mindell. At the time, I was very involved in process work with him. We had about 240 people in Stoos in Switzerland. A week of deep democracy processes where world topics came up. Towards the end, it gets very hot because what process work does in deep democracy is it really brings out that which is underlying and what we, because of bias and systemic preferences, tend to not work with. So I think it was the fourth or the fifth day. We ended up in a process where it got very hot and ended up with 240 people screaming at one another, yelling, carrying on, and the top facilitators in the world who were holding that, were 16 of us, could not comment. We could not stop that. Into the door of the session walks a, I don't know, 6, 7 year old Down syndrome girl. We have no idea where she came from. Never seen her before. It was the fifth day of being there. And we thought we were the only people on the premise. She walked in and she looked around and she started going up to people and go, shh, it's okay. It's okay. Shh. Within 3 or 4 minutes, that hall was quiet and everybody was returned to vulnerability. That was a leadership moment. 7-year-old Down syndrome. Tribal traditions ask for children to tell them their dreams in the morning because they take information from that. Because they hold that the child's dream is innocent and clearer than what we experience as adults by the time that we've been educated. Leadership, not a role that is belonging to the leader only. And in our experience, leaders breathe out when they are connected with that. The principle that I personally have been, and many of our coaches and leaders, been working with obviously more strongly in the last year of 2020 is that systems are in a constant state of emergence. Emergence is, make a bumper sticker. It is always in that process of attempting to express what's next or its potential. We have a choice whether we are reacting to it or whether we are creating from it. So these are the 5 principles. One for you to walk with these, have a look at these, and begin to look, where do you see one of these principles that actually unconsciously you were responding to in the interventions or in the engagements that you made. I want to play a little bit with Dancing with the Agile Manifesto from the principles. I've picked 2. The one is that there's this pressure and the push that for individuals and interactions over processes and tools. That lines up very closely to beyond the individual interactions or voices to the relationship system itself, because it has a wisdom that we really need to pay attention to. And I want to share with you just again on that meta view, upload your brilliance and how you can do that. Because if we think of the relationship system as an oracle, it has a voice, it has information of its own, different and beyond that of its individual players. So how do we reveal that? How do we find that? And if we really look at the system itself, then there are 3 metaphoric and really powerful examples I want to give you. Our task is to begin to develop skills and tools to see the system, see how it constellates, who sits always next to whom. Even if you look at the screen, if you have 20 people in front of you, what is the constellation physically, visually that you see there? What is the signals that you pick up from them when a certain statement is made? It's that focus in service of the larger whole. Hone your skills to see the constellations and what is happening. Here, the system is the one that we talk about when we say we need to hear from every voice. There's an input, there's information from every single one that is present. It's the practice of deep democracy. Sensing the system is something that we as coaches, it really is one of our primary contributions that we can bring. When we talk about sensing, we really are talking about what is happening in the emotional field. What's the weather in a meeting? It's one of the reasons why I love presentations like this, but I also miss the access to what is happening in the emotional field. So, what is this? And ask people about it. What's the experience in that side? What's the experience on that side of the room that you're sitting on or the things that you're aware of? Bring the emotional field, that atmosphere, bring it into the conversation. So, those three metaphoric skills are critical for us in order to begin to reveal the system to itself. I want to share with you that and I'm aware of time, that in a previous session that I did, we actually went, it was just after the start of the pandemic. And in a session that I did, we ended up in a conversation where I guided, set it up so that the group that was on the session with us, I asked them to listen for the voice of the virus. What is it trying to tell us? And I had somebody on the session that helped create the visuals for it. And it was fascinating because when we looked at the visual, when we looked at what people got from the oracle that is the system itself, from the pandemic, it talked about please listen, pay attention to what's happening in the environment. Look at what you're doing. Look at what's happening as a result of lockdown and that you now are telecommuting instead of driving. I wanted to share with you a very specific outcome of going directly to the system and asking it what's happening. The manifesto that item that you're talking about that is responding to change over following a plan. That's the piece that we are talking about, that systems are in a constant state of emergence. You are in a different place this morning, my time, nighttime, wherever it is that you are. I am in a different place this morning from the day that Zuzi contacted me to make this presentation. So we all are evolving, we all are responding to change. So that systems being in this constant state of change and emergence, how can we really, as agilists and as coaches, work with that? One of the things that I really have coined and talk about is that we need to work with signals of emergence as soon as we can, because if we don't, that's when emergence becomes an emergency. And just very simply, some of the things that I'm doing and that we see happening in corporate environments where people are attuned, more attuned to this kind of way of working, is to invite input right now on a weekly basis from the teams that you're working with, to talk about what's emerging for them as team in efficacy around telecommuting, around the pandemic, around the impact on business, whatever it is. Create and invite input conversations. The other one that we see more often, and it's interesting, that too is a Aboriginal wisdom practice, that is having failure conversations. One day a week, let us in our conversations talk with one another about where did we fail this week? What did we learn? Having failure conversations from which we can recreate and learn is one of the ways in which we can create psychological safety. Having failure conversations allows us to go, wow, that didn't go well, without feeling like it's going to show up in a performance review or I'm going to be fired for it. Creating a culture where we can talk about failures and where that can become the thing that we learn from, very powerful. I want for you to practice this one, dialogue with questions. Very often when we are in a task-oriented mode, we come up with suggestions. Why don't we do this? Do we do that? We just like we should do, but it's strategic. Begin to practice a situation in which literally you put 10 minutes aside and say, here's the topic. Let's just ask questions about it. And the questions are not allowed to have an opinion in it. You'll see that after the first 5 minutes. There will be sound like there's a question mark, but it already is an opinion. Just point to that. When you really go into that, asking stupid questions about something and questioning, you will see your job is to listen for themes that show up in the questions. When you begin to work with those questioning themes, going back to strategic mind, you'll have a very different set of things that you can begin to strategize from. So, three out of the box kinds of ways to work with emergence that I hope that you will find useful. I want for you to just have a model that I think you will recognize that you can talk about as well. Is that if we talk about that there are 5 guiding principles. Um, Principles by itself means nothing. It needs tools that we can use to execute on that awareness of the principle. Tools cannot be executed without skills. And once we have access to, there are certain principles that guides what's happening. Okay, if I'm aware of emergence, what are the tools that I can use? What are the skills that I need to use in order to leverage that? Once we begin to do that, we begin to develop the competencies that becomes the unconscious competence that really is required for us to be relationship systems workers. That's working directly with the system itself in all the ways that we just talked about. Um, there's a whole other thing. I don't have time for that at the moment. Have a look in our book on creating intelligent teams, because we're talking about that systems. There's a iterative 3-stage evolution when we work with systems. It really is about meeting. Where are you at the moment? What's happening in the team? Um, Sometimes we take too much time on that, and that's a trap if we don't do it at all. I was in a global board yesterday where the meeting didn't happen properly, and the whole thing grew up because there was conflict in it, and we didn't. It wasn't in the meeting. Then we need to get to revealing, and revealing is about what are the challenges, what are the strengths. That's the bulk of the work that we need to do in any given engagement. But if you are doing a 2 hour or an hour-long engagement, plan to be done with meeting and revealing at least 15 minutes before the end of the meeting. Because unless we get to phase 3, that is align and act, we won't get good feedback. So that iterative occurrence of meet, reveal, align, and act are powerful design principles, and it really is engagement principles for us. The From here, I just need for you to know that we all are sitting together in a new emergence, a new growth phase that we can create from. When you find yourself reacting to, burn that wood, let it happen. But then go and sit and water the plant again. That is about what can we create from it. Water that seedling because that's where we need to be able to go. There's some information about ORSC. We've got partners in 18 different countries, but I want to leave you with the Ubuntu saying out of South Africa, where I was born and grew up, that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's, I think, more and more that we all want to do. We want to be able to go together. So I'm going to pause there and stop sharing and go back to Susie.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I have this bit longer question, so I try to simplify it from Eve's thread. So he starts like, how does this connect to Belbin's work on teams? And then he continues, or and other works from ESA or NASA. And then he mentioned holacracy, etc. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I actually have you need to know that I'm a danger type and a little bit of a cynic. So what I'm going to say is going to sound very woo-woo. So forgive me, I'm in California California for too long. I truly believe that these modalities, these learning models, mental models, are simply looking at the same things, but from different vantage and different experience points. So I think there's a lot of synchronicity between all of it, but it will be influenced differently from a NASA perspective than from a coaching perspective. But in the end, there will be places where there are meeting spots. So I think it is a co-emergence, if you will. And here's the woo-woo part. If we really believe that there is a larger system that has intelligence, whether we want to call that the cosmos or whatever, then I do believe that there's a way in which many of us are dreamt together into the stream of evolution. There's a old original saying as well that says, "I thought I was planning, and all the while I was blown across the sky by a great wind." Mental models, thought leaders, we may be thinking that we are planning, but we are being blown across the sky by a great wind. We are channels for something as well. And I don't say it from an ego place. So I think this only synchronicity, different ways to get to the same place or to similar places. Too long an answer. I'm sorry, but it's very essence. It's very essence.
That's the way how to look at it. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, right? And I often ask speakers for something from their personal lives as well, or their histories. So, and I'm really curious about how the whole ORSC started. So how did you develop it, or how did you create it? Because you said 25 countries or something like this, 28.
Yeah. I grew up in South Africa during the apartheid era, and I was part of the movement against it. I was on faculty at Cape Town University at the time, and would walk into my course room, and half the course the participants wouldn't be there because they'd be in jail because they were colored or black. So I think my growing up in that kind of environment shaped my awareness around systems experiences. So I think that's the ground condition from which all of it evolved. And I became a training junkie. I did all sorts of courses and trainings. I did research on the Amazon. There was a drive to discover and know. And when I came into coaching, it felt as if all the pieces fell together from psychology and psychiatry and mediation. So I think that was a meeting point. And Faith, who I met years later, were also deeply involved in similar stuff. And we came together. There was a dreaming together around climate. So a lot of it emerged from oppression environments and from climate crisis. And funneled through coaching and back into the corporate model where I came from, I think is where ORSC was born. But it needed to be a confluence of all of those things. So,
what was the most difficult on going globally with ORSC?
I think there is what's the good and what's the bad. I think that the good is that as global impacts happen, whether it is pandemics or whether it is natural disasters or whether it is economy, the bad is that everybody is impacted and that there are certain countries that are struggling for a variety of reasons. The good is because we are not all located in one place. The parts that are not impacted, and that's the wonderful thing about systems, is that not the entire system will be critically involved. And then there's a part that's healthier that can help the other part emerge again and can create from that. So one of the sayings that we have is, who knows what is good and what is bad? So there's a bad piece, but the good side is that it doesn't hit everybody at the same time. And so there's a lifting that can happen.
Good. So change topic a bit. But I was always fascinated as how this whole program helped me in solving conflicts. So can you give us maybe some hints like how to solve conflicts? I hear this question at every other class. So
Yes, yes. Can we do another podcast on that?
yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. Because here's the thing. What we did was, because I'm a mediator as well, and I brought the mediation, which is a very strict protocol, the mediation protocol, and we created a coaching version of it. Because in mediation, you see a client maybe 3 times, and then it gets escalated up to arbitration if you can't resolve. In coaching, it's an ongoing piece. But there literally is the foundations of mediation is about the protocols is about that you need to give people time to ventilate. When 2 or 6 or however many people come together, and what we see in the US at the moment around systemic racism is there has to be space to ventilate. The biggest challenge with ventilation is that if people do it to one another, it escalates. So the mediation principle of being side by side and ventilating to somebody in front of you that can hear both and not take it as the truth, but as wood that needs to be burned. So ventilation and to somebody else that can hear that. And then that, so serious conflict, you always probably need somebody to be able to facilitate this. Because from that, you begin to listen for what are the interests in common. You will hear that both want to perform well, or that both feel frustrated. So you can hear interest in common. And if you can begin to leverage that after enough ventilation has happened, you can begin to, one of the things that we do in mediation that works well in the coaching world is to actually put the challenge or the issue out in front then. If the issue is layoffs and we disagree about that, but we now hear the interest in common, how can we now team together and figure out ways that we can do it well? So those 3 things: ventilation that's not interactive, listen for interest in common, and then take the issue out from between people and put it out in front, so that they can then collectively, from interest in common, plan for how to team in order to create the solutions.
It sounds so simple once you phrase it in the 3 points. Like click,
Yes,
click, click.
but it's not, and it really takes a very neutral stance of empathetic understanding. So that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of complexity to it that probably works better in situations where we can practice and really work with it more intimately. But conflict simply is a midwife for constructive change. It is a signal that something different is trying to happen. We just need to be able to open that package of information without making anybody wrong. It's simply a signal of emergence. Change is trying to happen. That's the thing we talked about earlier. It's not about who does what to whom. It's about when that happens, what's trying to happen. It's trying to emerge. So you can feel how it's a very different shift in stance. That's not often possible for me when I am in a fight with somebody else. Then somebody else, another third person, maybe need to come and help us there. I think that that's one of the places where we need to know as coaches and as leaders, when is it that we need to bring somebody else in to help us navigate this because we're too close. Conflicts.
They are fascinating because
Yeah.
sometimes they can disappear like this.
Yes. And I think the other thing is, it's that knowing our own style, knowing our own self. Am I conflict averse? If I'm somebody that's conflict averse, then I probably need to have a co-coach or somebody with me that can help lead in this. If I'm not conflict averse, then I need to be careful that I don't make light of it and go, yeah, that's not a problem. We can work with that. That's abuse of some sort. So it's a finely treading it.
I was curious also, you speak about failures, right? So, how difficult it is if you speak about failures in specifically bigger corporations? Do the leaders there accept it like well, or are there companies where they say like, no, no, we can't have any failure at all, or and what do you do in those type of situations?
Yeah, and again, that's where I think if you go back to the intelligences, if you are working with a company or with a team that is low on emotional social intelligence, it's harder. Then so sometimes if that's low, if you can begin to look and help them lift the gaze to it's not just me, it is the collective. Let's look in the direction of the collective. That actually creates more safety
Mhm.
than if it is just the me, you, and the how and the what of that. So that's one of the places where we really need to, the phase of meeting, we need to be able to meet them where they are, not where we think they should be. Um, and then once we've done that, it is depending on who I am as a coach, facilitator, leader. Um, is that the thing that I will be best use of? Or do I need to bring somebody else? So there's that place where I think as coaches, we also feel like I always have to say yes. But that's not necessarily true. There are places where it might not be my client. Somebody else may be better at it. Um, but I do think that the the growth mindset that is inherent in the unique entity that is certain corporations set them up for this work better than others. And I do think that in the crisis that we are in at the moment, it's a personal preference. I think we need to work with those that are willing to grow and are willing to take these risks, or what is perceived as risks, because that way movement will happen
Mhm.
faster, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Amir is asking, this cultural shift mainly comes top down. What if we have motivated individuals in the team level, but traditional mindset in leaders and managers in an organization where there is no room for big changes?
We have worked with an aviation company where we were working with the engineers, and that was some of the challenge where
Mhm.
they were there. They were oversight for some of the manufacturing parts. They were willing to be in a training with us at 6 o'clock in the morning because that's the time that they dedicated. So they could move it and on their levels, but felt stifled from the top. Um, One of the ways that you can work with that is to allow them to step into the shoes of management and have the experience of what's that like or what's going on there. So we often talk about lands work, to visit that land, or in the deep democracy process, step into the role of management.
Mhm.
What's going on there? And then come back to your own side and go, okay, if I know that that's what's happening, what's one of the ways that I can work with it from here? Because when you work in a situation like that, the true change makers are on the levels where people are willing to work with it. But they have to be able, they're the leapers, what we would say. But the management level are the tradition holders. So we need information and work to happen that can allow us to begin to access bridge building between the two. Uh, Otherwise, it remains two very separate conversations.
Mhm.
Again, easier said than done, and it takes time.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
you can also see how, from a meet, reveal, align, and act, if I'm asking the middle management or the people that I work with that's willing to make the changes, um, if I ask them to step into the land of management, um, I am asking them to meet management where it is
Mhm.
and to reveal some there and then I can come back. There's also one of the things that informs our work heavily is some of the laws of physics. There's a second law of physics that talks about non-locality. If something changes in one place, it's already different somewhere else. That's a physics law. So if my middle management team that I'm working with step into the land of management and begin to experience there, and then can come back and say, okay, given that, here's what we can do. From a physics perspective, something has already shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And change may be in the making where I don't think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see how there's a complexity to it that scientifically, actually, we can pay more attention to.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
The law of non-locality. Something changes in one place, it's already different somewhere else. The conversations that we have here, that you facilitated, the change, the growth that happens here, trust me, already is changing some of what's happening out there.
That's nice. Good.
That's the good news, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think I have two more questions for you for today.
Okay.
One is what you're super proud of. Like past few years, something which you're proud of yourself. What is it?
The answer may sound counterintuitive. I'm obviously proud of the fact that that the work has gotten legs in a global sphere the way it did, and that it's changing people the way it does. So very proud of that. It's huge. The thing that makes me feel humble and that brings me to tears, and that is the proud that I feel, is when I hear, and it's something that you said earlier, but when I hear people talk about how they came to this work as coaches and consultants, but the difference that it made to them in their own personal lives, and how it helped them through crisis, and how the walking the talk of it changed who they are, that is huge.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And again, from the aviation company we worked with, there was one of the engineers that was a 3-day engagement, and um, for 2 days he was just not. He didn't contribute. He didn't speak. He didn't participate. Nothing. Then we sent them with homework for that night. And he came back the next morning when we were debriefing what we were asking him to do, which was have a conversation with either a family or somebody, practicing some of the things we did today. And he came back, and he was the first one that talked. And he shared the story of how his wife died several years ago, and he's left with 2 teenage kids who are not talking to one another and constantly fighting. And he, the night before, then ended up with a alignment type of conversation with them. And he said, it's the first time since my wife died that I could have the two of them talk with one another. And he said, if this work will do this for me and my kids, I'll take it anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things. Because I think sometimes strategically on a corporate level, it's easier. But on the personal, intimate, that's a very different growth edge.
Wow, it is.
Yeah.
I can clearly say that.
Yeah.
So, last thing for you. What we shall remember from today?
One of the things that we do when we train facilitators is we have the concept of unzip, which means that in the training, we tell the participants, because we're training in facilitation, we tell the participants, if you see something happen between the two leaders, pause and ask us what happened. Because you often you will see something going on and go, well, what just happened? So we give them the permission to ask us, and then we can unzip and say, here's what happened. What I will remember from this session, and Susie, we go back a while, and from the engagement with you is, this was the first time that I used the platform of hopping.
Mhm.
And, I am a competent person. And even for my age, I am technologically, I'm with it. I'm good. And hop in and screen share just kicked our the buttskis and just putting me in the situation and in the chair of those that I have across from me every day and
Mhm.
how they struggle in my impatience with, come on, guys, get it. Just that humbling step down. No, you don't have it all.
Mhm.
And that's also emergence, and it deepened a relationship with you, Zuzi, and with the people that I can share my failure with and what I've learned from it.
Mhm. Well, sorry for the struggle. Hoping is not the most intuitive tool ever. So,
Well, it was great. It was an experience, it was an adventure. So thank you, thank you.
well,
Yeah.
so thank you very much. And we have a short break now, and we start at the top of the hour with the last speaker.
It was wonderful being with you, and thank you for doing the work that you and the team are doing. It really is in service. So
Thank
thank
you
you,
for
thank
joining
you.
us.
Thanks.